Daniel 1 sets the stage by showing Daniel arriving in Babylon, and that Daniel decided to be faithful to his God about his vegetarian diet, and was blessed for it. Daniel 2 starts with a dream that Nebuchadnezzar can't remember, but that he knew was troublesome. None of his wise men seemed to be able to show it to him. Deciding all his wise men were crackpots and frauds, Nebuchadnezzar issues a death decree. Daniel asks and receives an overnight reprieve to pray for an answer, and miraculously receives a night vision. He is shown the dream and its interpretation. Daniel returns to the king, and giving credit and glory to God, he recounts the dream to the king. The king had dreamt of a statue, head of gold, arms and chest of silver, belly and thighs or torso of brass, legs of iron, and feet of iron mixed with clay. And then a stone struck the feet, destroying the statue, and grows into a huge mountain. Daniel makes the head of gold the easiest to interpret. You are the head of gold. It's Babylon. Reading the chapter that we see a king represents a kingdom, and vice versa. Successive kingdoms are inferior, but there will only be 4 kingdoms or empire, and the 4th one of iron eventually mixing with clay. And then the stone, being the kingdom of heaven, will destroy them all. Herodotus states that the builders of Babylon used an abundance of gold to embellish the city. Using biblical evidence, we see Daniel 6 and 7 state that Babylon fell to Cyrus the Great of the Medo-Persian Empire. Wikipedia confirms this and states this occurred in 539 BC. 200 years prior, Isaiah explicitly mentions Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire, which is also called Medo-Persian because only 10 years prior, in 549 BC, Cyrus the Great had conquered the Median Empire. However, the Medes still had a lot of internal power, as is evidenced by Darius the Mede in Daniel 5, 6, and 9, and 11. The Bible confirms this, with Daniel 5 and 8 mentioning a united Medes and Persians empire, and having a Darius the Mede precede Cyrus as king of Babylon. Just because Darius was of Median ancestry does not mean the Median kingdom was implied by Daniel as part of the progression. The Median kingdom was founded before Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian kingdom. It was contemporaneous with Babylon, and it fell 10 years before Babylon did. Both Daniel 8:21 and Daniel 11:2 indicate that Greece would follow Medo-Persia. Wikipedia states that Alexander the Great and his Hellenistic Macedonian or Greek Empire conquered the Achaemenid Empire 200 years later, in 331, and then the majority of his known world by 323 BC, within 8 years. In his Antiquities, Josephus tells a story of Alexander visiting Jerusalem and the scribes and priests showing him these prophecies. Alexander died in 323 BC at the age of 32. His empire was shattered into almost 30 kingdoms, which were quickly welded together into 4 kingdoms, with 2 kingdoms, Ptolemaic Egypt and Hellenistic Seleucid Empire, fighting for control of the Levant area through the intertestamental period, culminating with the Maccabean Revolt in 165 BC and the Hasmonean dynasty in 140 BC. The Roman Empire mopped up the kingdoms left behind by Alexander's empire, starting in 168 BC when they conquered Macedonia, and ending in 30 BC when Cleopatra committed suicide and Rome took over Egypt, just in time for Jesus to be born and the New Testament era to begin under Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. A few commentators see the word bruise as possibly referring to the prophecy of the Messiah in Genesis 3:15. However, this word bruise is a different Hebrew word meaning to break into pieces, crush, or bruise, while the prophecy uses a different Hebrew word meaning to strike, crush, or bruise, but generally non-fatal. The bruising of the Iron Kingdom in Daniel is probably related to its breaking in pieces, and not an allusion to the Messiah that would come during the Iron Age. The Roman Empire was eventually split into the East and West, with the West eventually falling to Germanic barbarians in 476 AD, and eventually becoming what we know as Western Europe, and the Eastern Roman Empire becoming what we called the Byzantine Empire, continued to slowly shrink until falling to the Ottoman Empire in 1453. Thus history shows that the arms of silver were a united Medo-Persian Achaemenid Empire, as recorded in the history books. Some commentators note that this empire used silver in their taxation system. Many interpreters take the 2 arms to be the Medes and the Persians. The torso of brass or bronze was Alexander the Great's Macedonian or Grecian kingdom with its successors, some commentators note that bronze was used in Greek trade and warfare, and that the Greek soldiers wore bronze armor. Of note is that the post-Alexander divisions are not portrayed in the statue. The legs of iron would be the Roman Empire, and similar to Greece, Rome is often noted to have iron armor. Some commentators see East and West Roman Empire in the two legs. And finally we see the clay mixed with iron feet. Most commentators note the toes. Although not explicitly numbered in Daniel 2, would be assumed to be 10, and would be parallel to the 10 horns of Daniel 7. Up to the Roman Empire, the succession of kingdoms appears to be all about control of Judea and Jerusalem. With the succession of Christianity from Judaism, Jerusalem was no longer a focal point, and with the fall of Rome, there were no more empires of any major significance to the Christians spread among all the nations. And we know that the south and eastern territories of the ancient Roman Empire fell under control of the Muslim empires, so it appears the focus has shifted away from Jerusalem and the Levant to the main bulk of the Roman Empire in Western Europe. Daniel stated, "The kingdom shall be divided," and despite numerous attempts, notably by Charlemagne, Charles V of Spain, Louis XIV, Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and Hitler, the Roman Empire has never been revived, and Europe has never been truly reunited. The largest and closest attempts by Napoleon's First French Empire and Hitler's Third Reich both lasted little more than a decade. Daniel also says they will mingle with the seed of men. We see numerous, almost continuous intermarriages of royalty. George H. Merritt wrote in 1914 at the start of World War I that, I quote, "Europe at war can almost be likened to a huge family quarrel. The royal houses, especially the countries which are most vitally concerned by the war, are practically all of the same German stock and almost of one blood. There have been so many intermarriages between these houses that German blood dominates every European throne with the exception of the two small kingdoms of Serbia and Montenegro." Further exploring the chapter in depth, we note that the clay was the last to rise, but in Daniel 2:35 the clay is mentioned before the Roman iron, and in Daniel 2:45 it's before the Greek brass. In Daniel 5 we see something similar. In 5:4 we see the list starting with gold and silver, but in 5:23 we see silver, then gold. The Babylonian gold had fallen, and looking at the context, we see that the time of the Medo-Persian silver kingdom had come. We should also note that Daniel 2:41 specifically states it's potter's clay. Elsewhere in the Bible, we see that potter's clay is a symbol for the followers of God, where God is the potter forming and shaping them. The clay then would appear to be a Christian religio-political kingdom or system. However, the clay first appears during the Roman iron legs, not before. So there must be some influence prior to Greece and Rome that Daniel is trying to warn about. Daniel 2 doesn't give us enough information to pinpoint exactly what the clay entirely means. Maybe we'll see parallels in later prophecies. And finally, the stone. Rock, stone, and cornerstone are all symbols for Christ. And the mountain also represents a kingdom, as Daniel 2:35 and 2:44 indicate, as well as elsewhere in the Bible. One point is that the stone doesn't simply succeed the iron and clay, it destroys all previous empires, because the empire still existed in the statue after succession to the next empire. Succeeding empires would inherit the religious traditions of the previous empires, keeping them alive. Even today we still have remnants of an ancient Babylon with things like the base 60 system. We have 60 seconds to a minute, 60 minutes to an hour, both of which are related to 360 degrees in a circle. This was also related to their occult religious practices like astrology and liver reading of sacrificed animals, similar to tea leaf or palm reading we have today. The Persians, Greeks, and Romans inherited these ideas from the Babylonians, who in turn had already inherited some of them from the previous Assyrians, who inherited some of them from the Sumerians, etc. This may be a tie-in to the influence of the rising clay that Daniel is trying to warn us of. So this cannot be the first coming of Christ. When the end finally comes, all error will be removed and destroyed, all truth will be revealed, and the kingdom of the Lord will fill the whole earth.